The Most Honourable Order of the Bath is a British order of chivalry founded by George I on the 18th of May 1725. The name derives from the elaborate, medieval ceremony for appointing a knight, which involved bathing as one of its elements. The knights created were known as Knights of the Bath. George I erected the Knights of the Bath into a regular military order. He did not revive the Order of the Bath, since it had never previously existed as an order, in the sense of a body of knights who were governed by a set of statutes and whose numbers were replenished when vacancies occurred. The order consists of the sovereign, the Great Master, and three classes of members: Knight Grand Cross, a Dame Head Cross, Knight Commander, a Dame Commander, Companion. Members belong to either the civil or the military division. Prior to 1815, the order had only a single class, Knight Companion, which no longer exists. Recipients of the order are now usually senior military officers or senior civil servants. Commonwealth citizens not subjects of the Queen and foreigners may be made honorary members. The Order of the Bath is the fourth most senior of the British orders of chivalry, after the Most Noble Order of the Garter, the most ancient and most noble Order of the Thistle, and the most illustrious Order of St. Patrick. History. Knights of the Bath. In the Middle Ages, knighthood was often conferred with elaborate ceremonies. These usually involved the knight to be taking a bath, during which he was instructed in the duties of knighthood by more senior knights. He was then put to bed to dry. Clothed in a special robe, he was led with music to the chapel where he spent the night in a vigil. At dawn he made confession and attended Mass, then retired to his bed to sleep until it was fully daylight. He was then brought before the king, who, after instructing two senior knights to buckle the spurs to the knight-elect's heels, fastened a belt around his waist, then struck him on the neck, thus making him a knight. It was this accolade which was the essential act in creating a knight, and a simpler ceremony developed, conferring knighthood merely by striking or touching the knight to be on the shoulder with a sword, or dubbing him, as is still done today. In the early medieval period, the difference seems to have been that the full ceremonies were used for men from more prominent families. For the coronation of Henry IV in 1399, the full ceremonies were restricted to major royal occasions such as coronations, investitures of the Prince of Wales or royal dukes, and royal weddings, and the knights created became known as Knights of the Bath. Knights Bachelor continued to be created with the simpler form of ceremony. The last occasion on which Knights of the Bath were created was the coronation of Charles II in 1661. From at least 1625, and possibly from the reign of James I, Knights of the Bath were using the motto derives in uno, and wearing as a badge three crowns within a plain gold oval. These were both subsequently adopted by the Order of the Bath, a similar design of badges still worn by members of the civil division. The symbolism, however, is not entirely clear. The three joined in one may be a reference to the kingdoms of England, Scotland, and either France or Ireland, which were held by English and, later, British monarchs. This would correspond to the three crowns in the badge. Another explanation of the motto is that it refers to the Holy Trinity. Nicholas quotes a source who claims that prior to James I the motto was Tria Numina in uno, but from the reign of James I the word numina was dropped and the motto understood to mean Tria in uno. Foundation of the Order. The prime mover in the establishment of the Order of the Bath was John Anstice, Garter King of Arms, England's highest heraldic officer. Sir Anthony Wagner, a recent holder of the office of Garter, wrote of Anstice's motivations. It was Martin Leake's opinion that the trouble and opposition Anstey met with in establishing himself as Garter so embittered him against the heralds that when at last in 1718 he succeeded, He made it his prime object to aggrandize himself and his office at their expense. It is clear at least that he set out to make himself indispensable to the Earl Marshal, which was not hard, the political principles being congruous in the friendship already established, but also to Sir Robert Walpole and the Whig ministry, which can by no means have been easy, considering his known attachment to the Pretender and the circumstances under which he came into office. The main object of Anstice's next move, the revival or institution of the Order of the Bath, was probably that which it in fact secured, of ingratiating him with the all-powerful Prime Minister Sir Robert Walpole. The use of honours in the early 18th century differed considerably from the modern honours system, in which hundreds, if not thousands, of people each year receive honours on the basis of deserving accomplishments. The only honours available at the time were hereditary peerages and baronetcies, knighthoods and the Order of the Garter, none of which were awarded in large numbers. The political environment was also significantly different from today. The sovereign still exercised a power to be reckoned with in the 18th century. The court remained the centre of the political world. The king was limited in that he had to choose ministers who could command a majority in Parliament, but their choice remained his. The leader of an administration still had to command the king's personal confidence and approval. A strong following in Parliament depended on being able to supply places, pensions, and other marks of royal favour to the government's supporters. The attraction of the new order for Walpole was that it would provide a source of such favours to strengthen his political position. George I, having agreed to Walpole's proposal, Anstice was commissioned to draft statutes for the Order of the Bath. As noted above, he adopted the motto and badge used by the Knights of the Bath, as well as the colour of the riband and mantle, and the ceremony for creating a knight. The rest of the statutes were mostly based on those of the Order of the Garter, of which he was an officer. The order was founded by letters patent under the Great Seal dated the 18th of May 1725, and the statutes issued the following week. The order initially consisted of the sovereign, a prince of the blood royal as principal knight, a great master and 35 knights companion. Servant officers were attached to the order. These provided yet another opportunity for political patronage, as they were to be sinecures at the disposal of the Great Master, supported by fees from the knights. Despite the fact that the Bath was represented as a military order, only a few military officers were among the initial appointments. They may be broken down into categories as follows: members of the House of Commons, 14. The royal household as sinecures, 11. Diplomats, 4. The Walpole family, including the Prime Minister, 3. Naval and army officers, 3. Irish peers, 2. Country gentlemen with court appointments, 2. The majority of the new knights companions were knighted by the king and invested with the ribands and badges on the 27th of May 1725. Although the statutes set out the full medieval ceremony which was to be used for creating knights, this was not performed, and indeed was possibly never intended to be, as the original statutes contained a provision allowing the Great Master to dispense knights companion from these requirements. The original knights were dispensed from all the medieval ceremonies with the exception of the installation, which was performed in the Order's Chapel, the Henry VII Chapel in Westminster Abbey, on the 17th of June. This precedent was followed until 1812, after which the installation was also dispensed with, until its revival in the 20th century. The ceremonies, however, remained part of the statutes until 1847. Although the initial appointments to the order were largely political, from the 1770s appointments to the order were increasingly made for naval, military diplomatic achievements. This is partly due to the conflicts Britain was engaged in over this period. The Peninsular War resulted in so many deserving candidates for the Bath that a statute was issued allowing the appointment of extra knights in time of war, who were to be additional to the numerical limits imposed by the statutes, and whose number was not subject to any restrictions. Another statute, this one issued some 80 years earlier, had also added a military note to the order. Each knight was required, under certain circumstances, to supply and support 4 men-at-arms for a period not exceeding 42 days in any year, to serve in any part of Great Britain. This company was to be captained by the Great Master, who had to supply 4 trumpeters, and was also to appoint 8 officers for this body. However, the statute was never invoked. In 1815, with the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the Prince Regent expanded the Order of the Bath to the end that those officers who have had the opportunities of signalizing themselves by eminent services during the late war may share in the honors of the said order, and that the names may be delivered down to remote posterity, accompanied by the marks of distinction which they have so nobly earned. The order was now to consist of 3 classes: Knights Grand Cross, Knights Commander, and Companions. The existing Knights Companion became Knight Grand Cross. This class was limited to 72 members, of which 12 could be appointed for civil or diplomatic services. The military members had to be of the rank of at least Major General or Rear Admiral. The Knights Commander were limited to 180, exclusive of foreign nationals holding British commissions, up to 10 of whom could be appointed as honorary Knights Commander. They had to be of the rank of lieutenant colonel or post captain. The number of companions was not specified, but they had to have received a medal or been mentioned in dispatches since the start of the war in 1803. A list of about 500 names was subsequently published. 2 further officers were appointed, an officer of arms attendant on the Knights Commanders and Companions, and a secretary appertaining to the Knights Commanders and Companions. The large increase in numbers caused some complaints that such an expansion would reduce the prestige of the order. The Victorian Era. In 1847, Queen Victoria issued new statutes eliminating all references to an exclusively military order, as well as removing the word military from the full name of the order. This opened up the grades of Knight Commander and Companion to civil appointments, and the military and civil divisions of the order were established. New numerical limits were imposed, and the opportunity also taken to regularize the 1815 expansion of the order. The 1847 statutes also abolished all the medieval ritual. However, they did introduce a formal investiture ceremony, conducted by the sovereign wearing the mantle and insignia of the order, attended by the officers and as many GCBs as possible in the mantles. In 1859, a further edition of the statutes was issued. The changes related mainly to the costs associated with the order. Prior to this date, it had been the policy that the insignia were to be returned on the death of the holder. The exception had been foreigners who had been awarded honorary membership. In addition, foreigners had usually been provided with stars made of silver and diamonds, whereas ordinary members had only embroidered stars. The decision was made to award silver stars to all members, and only require the return of the collar. The Crown had also been paying the fees due to the officers of the order for members who had been appointed for the services in the recent war. The fees were abolished and replaced with a salary of approximately the same average value. The offices of genealogist and messenger were abolished, and those of registrar and secretary combined. the 20th century. In 1910, after his accession to the throne, George V ordered the revival of the installation ceremony, perhaps prompted by the first installation ceremony of the more junior Order of St. Michael and St. George, held a few years earlier, and a building of a new chapel for the Order of the Thistle in 1911. The installation ceremony took place on the 22nd of July 1913 in the Henry VII Chapel, and installations have been held at regular intervals since. Prior to the 1913 installation, it was necessary to adapt the chapel to accommodate the larger number of members. An appeal was made to the members of the order, and following the installation a surplus remained. A committee was formed from the offices to administer the Bath Chapel Fund, and over time this committee has come to consider other matters than purely financial ones. Another revision of the statutes of the order was undertaken in 1925, to consolidate the 41 additional statutes which had been issued since the 1859 revision. Women were admitted to the order in 1971. In the 1971 New Year Honours, Jeanne Nun became the first woman admitted to the order. In 1975, Princess Alice, Duchess of Gloucester, and aunt of Elizabeth II, became the first woman to reach the highest rank, Dame Head Cross. Princess Alice was a direct descendant of the order's first Great Master, and her husband, who had died the previous year, had also held that office. Composition. Sovereign. The British sovereign is the sovereign of the Order of the Bath. As with all honours except those in the sovereign's personal gift, the sovereign makes all appointments to the order on the advice of the government. Great Master. The next most senior member of the order is the Great Master, of which there have been 9. 1725 to 1749. John Montagu, 2nd Duke of Montagu. 1749 to 1767, 1767 to 1827, Prince Frederick, Duke of York and Albany. 1827 to 1830, Prince William, Duke of Clarence and St Andrews. 1830 to 1837, 1837 to 1843, Prince Augustus Frederick, Duke of Sussex. 1843 to 1861, Albert Prince Consort. 1861 to 1897, 1897 to 1901, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales. 1901 to 1942, Prince Arthur, Duke of Connaught and Strathearn. 1942 to 1974, Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester. 1974 present, Charles, Prince of Wales. Originally a prince of the blood royal, as the principal knight companion, ranked next after the sovereign. This position was joined to that of the Great Master in the Statutes of 1847. The Great Master and Principal Knight is now either a descendant of George I or some other exalted personage. The holder of the office has custody of the seal of the order and is responsible for enforcing the statutes. Members. The statutes also provide for the following: 120 knights a dame's Grand Cross, 355 knights commander a dame's commander, 1,925 companions. Regular membership is limited to citizens of the United Kingdom and of other Commonwealth countries of which the Queen is sovereign. Appointees are usually officers of the armed forces or senior civil servants, such as permanent secretaries. Members appointed to the civil division must by the personal services to Crown or by the performance of public duties have merited royal favour. Appointments to the military division are restricted by the minimum rank of the individual. GCBs hold the rank of Admiral in the Royal Navy, General in the British Army or Royal Marines, or Air Chief Marshal in the Royal Air Force. KCBs must at least hold the rank of Vice Admiral, Lieutenant General in the Army or Marines, or Air Marshal. CBs tend to be of the rank of Rear Admiral Herald Major General in the Army, a Royal Marines, or Air Vice Marshal, and in addition must have been mentioned in dispatches for distinction in a command position in a combat situation, although the latter is no longer a requirement. Non-line officers may be appointed only for meritorious service in wartime. Commonwealth citizens not subjects of the Queen and foreigners may be made honorary members. Queen Elizabeth II has established the custom of awarding an honorary GCB to visiting heads of state, for example Gustav Heinemann and Josip Broz Tito, Ronald Reagan, Lech Walesa, Dr. Sench Tabone, President of Malta in 1992, Fernando Enrique Cardoso, George H. W. Bush, Nicolas Sarkozy in March 2008. In 2012, a former Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, Turkish President Abdullah Gül, Slovenian President Dr. Danilo Turk, Mexican President Felipe Calderón, and South African President Jacob Zuma. Foreign generals are also often given honorary appointments to the order, for example, Marshal Ferdinand Foch and Marshal Joseph Joffre during World War I, Marshal Georgy Zhukov, King Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia, General Dwight D. Eisenhower and General Douglas MacArthur during World War II, and General Norman Schwarzkopf and General Colin Powell after the Gulf War. A more controversial member of the order was Robert Mugabe, whose honor was stripped by the Queen on the advice of the Foreign Secretary, David Miliband, on 25 June 2008, as a mark of revulsion at the abuse of human rights and abject disregard for the democratic process in Zimbabwe over which President Mugabe has presided. Honorary members do not count towards the numerical limits in each class. In addition, the statutes allow the sovereign to exceed the limits in time of war or other exceptional circumstances. Offices. The Order of the Bath now has 6 officers: a Dean, John Hall, Dean of Westminster; a King of Arms, Michael Boyce, Baron Boyce; a Registrar and Secretary, Ian Henderson; a Deputy Secretary, Alexander Matheson of Matheson, a genealogist, Thomas Woodcock; the Gentleman Usher of the Scarlet Rod, Charles Vivian. The office of Dean is held by the Dean of Westminster. The King of Arms, responsible for heraldry, is known as Bath King of Arms. He is not, however, a member of the College of Arms, like many heralds. The Order's usher is known as the Gentleman Usher of the Scarlet Rod. He does not, unlike his Order of the Garter equivalent, perform any duties in the House of Lords. There were originally 7 officers, each of whom was to receive fees from the Knights Companion both on appointment and annually thereafter. The office of Messenger was abolished in 1859. The office of genealogist was abolished at the same time, but revived in 1913. The offices of Registrar and Secretary were formally merged in 1859, although the 2 positions had been held concurrently for the previous century. An Officer of Arms and a Secretary for the Knights Commander and Companions were established in 1815, but abolished in 1847. The office of Deputy Secretary was created in 1925. Under the Hanoverian kings, certain of the offices also held heraldic office. The office of Blancurcier, Herald of Arms, was attached to that of the genealogist, Brunswick Herald of Arms to the Gentleman Usher, and Bath King of Arms was also made Gloucester King of Arms with heraldic jurisdiction over Wales. This was the result of a move by Anstice to give the holders of these sinecures greater security. The offices of the Order of the Bath were held at the pleasure of the Great Master, while appointments to the heraldic offices were made by the King under the Great Seal and were for life. Habit and insignia. Members of the order wear elaborate costumes on important occasions, which vary by rank. The mantle, worn only by knights and dames Grand Cross, is made of crimson satin lined with white taffeta. On the left side is a representation of the star. The mantle is bound with two large tassels. The hat, worn only by Knights and Dames Grand Cross and Knights and Dames Commander, is made of black velvet. It includes an upright plume of feathers. The collar, worn only by Knights and Dames Grand Cross, is made of gold and weighs 30 troy ounces. It consists of depictions of 9 imperial crowns and 8 sets of flowers, connected by 17 silver knots. On lesser occasions, simply insignia are used. The star is used only by Knights and Dames Grand Cross and Knights and Dames Commander. Its style varies by rank and division. It is worn pinned to the left breast. The star for military Knights and Dames Grand Cross consists of a Maltese cross on top of an 8-pointed silver star. The star for military Knights and Dames Commander is an 8-pointed silver cross pate. Each bears in the center 3 crowns surrounded by a red ring bearing the motto of the order in gold letters. The circle is flanked by 2 laurel branches and is above a scroll bearing the words "Erected" in gold letters. The star for civil Knights and Dames Grand Cross consists of an 8-pointed silver star. Without the Maltese cross, the star for civil Knights and Dames Commander is an 8-pointed silver cross pate. The design of each is the same as the design of the military stars, except that the laurel branches and the words "Erected" are excluded. The badge varies in design, size and manner of wearing by rank and division. The Knight and Dame Grand Cross badge is larger than the Knight and Dame Commander's badge, which is in turn larger than the Companion's badge. However, these are all suspended on a crimson ribbon. Knights and Dames Grand Cross wear the badge on a reband sash, passing from the right shoulder to the left hip. Knights Commander and male companions wear the badge from a ribbon worn around the neck. Dames Commander and female companions wear the badge from a bow on the left side. The military badge is a gold Maltese cross of 8 points, enameled in white. Each point of the cross is decorated by a small gold ball. Each angle has a small figure of a lion. The center of the cross bears 3 crowns on the obverse side, and a rose, a thistle and a shamrock, emanating from a scepter on the reverse side. Both emblems are surrounded by a red circular ring bearing the motto of the order, which are in turn flanked by 2 laurel branches. Above a scroll bearing the words "Erected" in gold letters. The civil badge is a plain gold oval, bearing 3 crowns on the obverse side, and a rose, a thistle and a shamrock, emanating from a scepter on the reverse side. Both emblems are surrounded by a ring bearing the motto of the order. On certain holidays designated by the sovereign, members attending formal events may wear the order's collar over the military uniform or evening wear. When collars are worn, the badge is suspended from the collar. The collars and badges of Knights and Dames Grand Cross are returned to the central chancery of the orders of knighthood upon the decease of their owners. All other insignia may be retained by their owners.